and I selected a film from Thailand, 2003, I believe, and it was called Ong Bak.
Oh, I
Ong Bak.
remember that.
And here's
Make
the thing. I screened that film. We screened it at midnight, 1,200 people losing their mind. And
mm,
overnight, suddenly you could name a film star from Thailand.
mm,
No one could at that point. Like there was it's Thailand. No one could even remember even ever seeing a film from Thailand. And
right.
this film changed that country's cinema because overnight they had a internationally recognizable star in Tony Jaa.
With this extensive background you have with the festival circuit and working for the horror network that was
Yeah, Shutter.
Shutter. Yeah, sorry about that. And yeah, I'm just wondering if you have any kind of scenarios there that kind of lay out some of those film opportunities. I'm sure you've encountered situations like the one with Cabin Fever. There must be some other stories about some of these lesser known films that took their big jump, kind of coming out of those situations that I'm sure you must have presided over or at least watched some of those slide through.
Yeah, I mean, if we talk about martial arts films, I'm a big fan of martial arts films. And when I say martial arts films, I mean good martial arts films.
Mhm.
Uh, and I selected a film from Thailand, 2003, I believe, and it was called Ong Bak.
Oh, I
Ong
remember
Bak's,
that.
and
Make
here's the thing. I screened that film. We screened it at midnight, 1,200 people losing their mind. And
mm,
overnight, suddenly you could name a film star from Thailand.
mm,
No one could at that point. Like there was it's Thailand. No one could even remember even ever seeing a film from Thailand. And
right.
this film changed that country's cinema because overnight they had a internationally recognizable star in Tony Jaa.
Mhm.
And there was another bidding war. People were like, they were trying, like, they were flying the print, trying to to private screening rooms. People like had heard that this film is just insane. And you watch that film and you see the physical prowess and action of Tony Jaa and his team. It's incredible.
Yeah.
And then it got locked down and sold to Magnolia. And they did a tremendous, when they were doing their marketing, they brought in Tony Jaa to perform at halftime shows for the NBA.
Wow. Wow.
Like that's brilliant. How are you going to introduce a martial arts star to your audience, your number one primary audience? Like boom, this is the audience we want. We want basketball fans.
Right.
Makes sense. Um, so that was a really special one. Um,
What I find interesting about that, it kind of, sorry for cutting you off there, but just it makes me think, a few years ago, I hear it less now. Everyone was talking about trying to find the next Blair Witch, Paranormal Activity, that kind of thing, and then they were juxtapositioning that as the only option in a sense compared to coming up with 3, 4, 5 million bucks. But is there something that is a more realistic way to look at entering in the kind of indie film low budget market that maybe isn't all the way down to Paranormal Activity level in terms of budget, but isn't necessarily saying you got to get yourself prepped to put together a $3 million movie? It sounds like Ong Bak was maybe one of those because I don't know what the budget was, but I don't think it was that high. It was just incredible skill by
yeah, it wasn't that
Tony
high. I
Jaa.
mean, and even when you made a really good kind of point with Blair Witch and Paranormal Activity. I mean, it's really interesting because Blair Witch was such a sensation.
Mhm.
And then there was really nothing else like it until Paranormal Activity.
Right.
Like there was nothing else that hit. There were a lot of like smaller knockoffs, but nothing else really kind of hit in the found footage until kind of Paranormal Activity. And then that was like the rebirth of found footage. And so and it just birthed a lot of copycats. If you've got the budget, if you've got like a $2, $3 million budget, just double down on the story
Mhm.
and do something that is original. Here's the thing. Blair Witch Project, no one had seen anything like that before. Paranormal Activity, now that's a different story. Okay, Paranormal Activity, if you deconstruct that, Paranormal Activity I believe it premiered at Slam Dance
Mhm.
and then kind of got pulled because someone saw the potential in the film and they pulled it back and they got copious kind of like notes. I think like Steven Spielberg even gave notes. Like there were a lot of industry heavy hitters who gave notes and they redid the film
Mhm.
and then it got sold. But also there was a insane marketing campaign behind the success of that film. A lot of people were like, oh, it's like a low budget film. I'm like, it was made for that much money, but it was marketed for 5 times that amount.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Paranormal Activity, they did special midnight shows.
Mm.
And at that point, and even now, it's like midnight shows are a rarity. And it was kind of a word of mouth thing. It's like if you got invited to a midnight show, everyone in that audience is excited. Like you can smell the pheromones and everything, just like everyone like, oh, what and so you could almost show them anything
Mhm.
and the crowd is going to go off. But there's just so much smart marketing behind that, what became that franchise.
Mhm.
And even like it's like, oh well, the Conjuring was made for this much. Like, yeah, but look who released it. So if you want to cut through, if you got that kind of money, make sure that you're giving the people something they haven't seen before.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, personally, I love watching films where like, where is this going? And they're like, oh wow, it's going there.
Yeah.
Like I like being surprised. So don't try and give people something they've seen before, because honestly, they don't want it. It's not going to be a success. It's going to be relegated to like, okay, copycat art. Like it depends. I mean, and again, it depends on why you're making the film.
Mhm.
But it's kind of a misleading thing when people look at like the success of low budget horror, where like, yeah, but Jason Blum's got his marketing clout behind it
Right.
because he's flipped it to another studio. Like
Mhm. Mhm.
like Saw was made for next to nothing,
Mhm.
but it had massive marketing clout and buzz behind it.
Yeah. Yeah. And how much does that affect your thing? Let's say, for example, you see an idea that someone's like it's a 200,000 or $300,000 idea. It's a tight budget, but it's a great idea. Like, how much is that affected by, well, you know, it's going to do well because it's a great idea. We've got some ideas to push it versus it's a great idea, but it's not going to fly unless you have, a massive marketing budget a la Paranormal Activity behind it to kind of really make something out of it. And
Yeah. So
where's
then
the line there?
so then that's the secret about getting a sales agent on board or
Right.
getting it into the hands and the eyes of people who can make it happen or
Yeah.
get it elevated. Like, yeah, so every once in a while you see something and we're like, oh, like it was an interesting time because when I was a film festival programmer, I was doing the same job essentially as acquisitions. It was called an acquisitions job. So people who work for Sony, Lionsgate, all these companies, they have acquisitions people, and they're the people who go in and it's their job to uncover the new films and put the offers on them and bring them in and turn them into big films.
Right.
Like I know the guy who bought like District 9, like saw District 9, it was like, we want this. He was working for Sony and he went and like, boom.
Great.
And another one, a martial arts film, The Raid. The Raid started at Midnight Madness,
Yeah.
and Sony saw that and they just went in like, we want them, and they outbid everyone. I mean, it's not just outbidding, it's making a deal with the producers that they're happy with. And yeah, so I was doing that job, but in a film festival world.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I'd spent my whole, I'll backtrack to talk about what my role was at the film festival is. I'd spend the whole year up until end of July watching films and tracking films, working through my network of producers, directors, sales agents, distributors, national film boards, um, and asking like, what new films do you have that you think I'm going to like? Like, what do you have a new horror film? And trying to find the gems. Okay. I'd never go after studio films because I liked discovery. If there's a studio film coming, well, it's already got its home. It's already got its marketing. But let me try and find something new. Another good one that I discovered. There's this film called Hardcore Henry.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah, my son loved it.
Yeah, it's like a first person shooter game.
Yeah, yeah.
And then that director went on to do Nobody, the film with Bob Odenkirk, which was like John Wick. Who expected Bob Odenkirk to be like a John Wick-esque gunplay character? So that was an example of a director who came in, did this, and then jumped up. Um, so so I'd spend the time, and that's what it's like. I'd love to see like, oh, look, here's this kind of crazy film from Russia. Here's
Mhm.
this crazy film from Thailand. But I watch a lot of films, so I really, that's the thing, is I really got a sense of what works
Mhm.
and what works with an audience. And I'd see stuff like, well, and also midnight, it's a certain kind of film for a midnight audience. And so I can't have something which starts off quiet and gentle and then goes crazy. Like it's, you've got to catch that audience within the first 15 minutes.
Mhm. Mhm.
I'd seen films where it's like, yeah, the last 15 minutes are crazy, but people are going to be leaving. People are going to be looking at their watch. Like you gotta, there's a certain formula there. A really interesting one um, is a film called You're Next by Adam Wingard and Simon Barrett.
Okay.
And Your Next was actually tailor-made for a Midnight Madness audience because that director and that writer had seen Midnight Madness films and they were like, we're going to make a film for this audience. And so it's very calculated with the beats and how it's done.
Mhm.
And that director actually premiered one of his, I think it's his second film, was called A Horrible Way to Die. This is a good story.
Hmm.
Horrible Way to Die was a micro budget film. Okay, we're talking like under $50,000.
Well,
Okay. Um, Really compelling story about a woman. You're slowly getting to know her, and you're. It looks like she's maybe an AA or something. She's getting through something, and then it comes up that's like she actually dated a serial killer who's in jail. She was kind of like an alcoholic, oblivious to what was going on around her, and her husband was this depraved killer.
hmm.
And so you see this woman kind of like dealing with, and it's just like it was an interesting kind of juxtaposition of like the victims. Who are the victims in these stories?
Yeah.
And then there's a really amazing twist because like it looks there's a romance. This is kind of coming out in this romance. She's got this new romance with someone, and you
Mhm.
slowly start understanding her story. Um, Really great, fun, little low budget, smartly written film. And this is a film it's like they knew they had only this much, and so they were like, how are we going to maximize it?
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, the director of that, he did Horrible Way to Die, then he went on to do Your Next, then he did The Guest, then he did the Blair Witch reboot, and then he did Godzilla versus Kong.
Okay.
And he's doing the next, he's done the next Godzilla Kong film,
Mhm.
and he and his writing partner, they're currently working on the kind of sequel to Face Off.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, because of everything that Simon Barrett said, that Adam Wingard has learned through the making of these big, huge green screen special effects things, he can look at an action scene and like, oh, this is how we would do it.
Mhm.
It's this and this. But there's a director who started making micro budget films and now is at the top of the food chain when it comes to that stuff. So I'm happy to be able to have claimed to have discovered that. But that's the thing is I saw that film
Mhm.
and it delivered on story.
Mhm.
It didn't matter that it was that you didn't really know any of the actors. There was just a really smart little twisted story there that
Yeah.
delivered. So I would spend my time going through all these films, having to reject films. That was the really hard part, is seeing a film that was good but not good enough.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and I mean, it's going to be a separate conversation about how film festivals work because there's a certain line, there's a certain way that when your film gets submitted, it goes through different kind of waves of screeners and slowly will work up its way to
Mhm.
the main programmers.
Right.
But I'd select and assemble a lineup of 10 films. Then we'd invite them and then basically host events to make these films, to help these films make the biggest splash in the market as they possibly could. So that's one of the other expertises that I have is like I know how to do events.
Mhm.
So I've got a lot of different tools in my toolbox for filmmakers to kind of help them out on. So it's like, so it's interesting because the film festival, working as a programmer and a curator for a film festival just taught me so many different aspects of the filmmaking business that I'm able to now pass on to other filmmakers.